Brad and Dan talk shite.
The year was 1983, and the Earth shook on its axis as possibly the most important arrivals in the history of humankind were introduced, screaming to the world. Despite being born 2 months and 4,000 miles apart, these small bundles of flesh, bone, and puppy fat were fated to change the shape of audio health content forevermore. Unaware of each other's existence, these two audiophiles wandered lonely and lost round this mortal coil, desperately searching for meaning in their mundane meanderings in modern life. Dan tried his hand at everything from interpretive dance to being a 19th century French philosopher, while Brad etched out cartoons of fat American tourists on the streets of British Columbia before taking up foot modelling. But it wasn't until the summer of 2020, when they met via the magic of social media, that their destiny became clear and the Talking Shit with Brad and Dan podcast was born. Welcome one and all to the show. I am Dan, and with me as ever is the jock of shock himself, Brad. How's it going, buddy? How's your shit?
Well, damn, I don't even know what to say after that intro. Wow, that's something.
Just giving the listeners a little background on you and I before we started this merry little podcast.
My shit's doing good, man. It's an interesting time, as we've kind of alluded to in the past episode. I'm a new dad to be, with all the joyous and frightful things that come along with that. We find out the gender of our baby in a couple weeks, which has had us like elated and also like, when is it coming? We're like,
you mean it isn't a Subway sandwich that you alluded to in one of your recent social media posts?
Everyone seemed to like that one. I don't know. I've always related, whenever I hear that something is either a foot or 6 inches, I'm like, that's a Subway sub, or that's half of a Subway sub. So when I saw 6 inches.
Just for any listener who is not one of Brad's army of social media followers, Brad and his lovely lady are cataloguing the progress of the pregnancy with a picture. Is it every week?
Every 2 weeks. She won't let me do every week.
Okay. So you start of what baby's progress is. So you've had like bell peppers, like strawberry or something like that along the way. So the last one, I think you, without your wife's permission, chose a fairly well-stuffed Subway sandwich to highlight the size of the baby.
Yeah, that was my cheeky one, because we've having jokes about all the different apps and how they must be just throwing a dart at a dartboard of objects for like the weekly whatever baby is. So this one was hey, I could totally do this. I know what's 6 inches long. Like, and it's not someone's penis. Don't just get that out of your head.
I wasn't going there. Actually, my next comment was about parenting apps and how I am so anti them.
Yeah.
They just my good lady wife and I have 3 kids, all at varying ages, from very nearly moving out of the house to still actually being interested in our existence. So the apps weren't really a thing when our eldest was a baby.
Right.
So we got a book, and we read a book, and we got a vague idea. But having had 3 children, I can guarantee you they are all spectacularly different.
Yes.
And no app is going to be able to, cater for their different personalities.
No.
One of our friends who would happily live her life via an Excel spreadsheet, lived for this app when her child was young. So anytime child varied off what this app said they should be doing, it was a catastrophe. It was the worst thing that had ever happened. And you just think, dude, the human race has been around for longer than smartphones.
Yes.
And we're still here. We were here before medicine, and we're still here. Just because your app says baby should have been asleep 7 minutes ago and they're not, that's not the end of the fucking world.
Yeah.
I've got a real downer on apps like that. Obviously, the one you've got isn't that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm just using pregnancy apps that track that, but no.
I just had to have a little rant there, because that's the kind of guy I am. Just bitter, twisted, hateful.
No, I totally get that. And aside from that, Well, let's say along with that, today I've reached my 1 month of dad jokes. 1 whole month so far, 11 more to go. People have been either
It's
groaning.
a lifetime to go. Don't worry about it.
I gotta get like accustomed, get them built up in me. Like it's almost like I'm going to school to become ready for dad jokes. But outside
this is your Rocky montage.
There you go.
This is you running up the steps and
with a notepad,
jumping around. Yeah, it's nice.
And then I've got a major milestone coming up in a couple days. Actually, I am 6 month. It'll be my 6 month stomaversary. John and I have been together for 6 whole months, which
bizarrely offered up imagery of a candle in your stoma, but that's probably a bit wrong.
So
no, congratulations. I mean,
thank you.
So I saw again, for anyone who's not obsessively following Brad on social media, I saw the photo you posted of your pre and post stoma, and the difference is remarkable. It's
insane.
You're brewing a little gut there, buddy. That's
I've been told I'm getting a dad bod.
Yeah.
Just in time.
Welcome to the club.
No, it's
bastard club.
It's good. I've had the whole like thought about it because like I'm trying to show my progression with this photo series I've been doing, and I realize I'm like, yeah, I'm going to show myself in a state that I have never been before, and it's going to be weird, but I need to do it.
I think that's the point, though. I think, you look far healthier in this picture, because you are, and my wife says this to me all the time, rapidly encroaching on 40. So, you should have a little bit of timber around the frame. It's not like you do have any real timber around the frame. No. It's just from picture 1 to picture 2. There's a marked difference.
It's quite a bit.
Essentially, you're malnourished in one of the pictures, which
yes.
I'm assuming you were at the time.
I think it's a 40-pound difference. No. Yeah, 40-pound difference. Because I was like 120. That? That's a lot. Let's go just for a round number of 80.
80.
I'm just going to throw that out there. But yeah, man,
just imagine it.
That has been my shit, and it has been good news. But sir, how's your shit been? Yeah,
I'm all good. Child 2 had a birthday last week, so I've basically just stuffed my face with her cake. I'm not a monster. I allowed her to have at least a slice. But yeah, the rest of the time I've literally just been gorging on cake. Travelled a lot for work last week. That was pretty exhausting, but it was good.
You seem to have some misadventures there.
Oh God, just one of my flights is always delayed. So I have to work in Dublin in Ireland pretty much every 2 weeks, which is an absolute pleasure. It's a lovely place to go. The people are fantastic. But the fucking Friday night flight is always delayed without fail. And so people say, well, get the Saturday morning flight. But yeah, but that's a whole 12, 14 hours away from home.
Yeah.
So I'd rather get home at 1 o'clock in the morning than 10, 11 o'clock the next day.
Yeah.
But it's just when you get to the airport and you look at the departure board and you go, oh, it's on time. It's on fucking time.
Miracle.
And you go and get yourself a coffee or you go and get yourself some food and then you go back to the departure board and it says it's delayed. And you want to stab every single one of them who works for that company. Obviously, I'm not endorsing violence, but after a long week, so I think I'd driven like 1,300 miles and I'd had a flight, and it'd been a really busy week. It'd been a good week, but it'd been busy. That's not what you want on a Friday night. You want to just get on your plane home. It's only a 35-minute flight as well.
Crazy.
So when you're delayed for longer than the flight takes, it's a real kick to the shins. But if that's the worst thing I've got to complain about last week, that's fine.
That's good.
And I think that is the worst I've got to complain about.
So you've been feeling a little bit better from the last recording?
I think I've been so busy I haven't been able to pay any attention to how I feel. So that's good. Distraction's good.
It can be good. There's times where the distractions is not going to be enough.
Yeah. Well, obviously it was last week, so yeah, I think I am feeling a little better. Yeah, we'll see. You know, I've got my latest IV infusion on Friday, so we'll see
Okay.
how that
That was going to
goes.
be my callback, was to
Yeah.
reacquaint ourselves with where you were with your infusion. So we'll catch
Yeah,
back
so
next time.
Yeah. So I've got to go for a blood test tomorrow, which will probably take about 2 hours to wait for. And then I've got my infusion on Friday. But the infusion, so they started off at like 4 hours, then they go down to 3 hours, go down
Yeah,
to 2
yeah,
hours,
yeah.
go down to 1 hour. I think this one I'm down to half an hour.
For
So I'm
Remicade?
hoping I can be
Or what? How do you say it? You say the street name.
infliximab.
Yeah. Sorry.
Infliximab. That is because I'm gangster.
I've
I'm
noticed
from the street.
UK people tend to use the more medical name rather than the street name.
Well, that's because we don't really have general medical marketing
Okay.
in the UK. We have the
So
NHS,
this is
which
American
provide the
thing.
drugs. Yeah.
Yeah,
So in America, where I think this is purely me spitballing,
Mhm.
but I think where you have a medical profession which is very competitive, shall we say, in the marketplace. Yeah, and there's lots of money involved. I think that's when you get like more marketed names.
Buzzwords, I
As
guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, we generally get the doctors just talking to us about the drug,
Okay.
and there will only be one drug of that type.
Mhm.
There won't be 5 different drugs of that type with a different brand name and a different colourful package. And
Right.
it's not like we're at the OxyContin levels of marketing within the UK that were made famous by numerous documentaries and films. So yeah, I mean, this is something we need to look at in a future episode. I think is the difference between healthcare systems.
I
think that's really fascinating
100%.
because yeah, sometimes you're talking about stuff and it just blows my mind, and obviously the same happens this way. So
we're closer to you than we are the States, but we still have those things that, because we're like right above the US, we still have the street name stuff, right? We don't generally use the drug names because it's easier. So it would be an interesting conversation to have. Maybe one of our like bigger episodes is to have someone from each section: Canada, US, UK, and like just kind of round table discussion.
Yeah, maybe we'll stick to the English speaking folks. It might be a little complex if we've got people from Taiwan, Beijing.
We can always diversify in the future to see how more outside countries deal with.
Well, yeah, it's just my Mandarin isn't that good. You know, I think that's the only issue I'm talking about. I'm not talking about anything else. It's just I'm not sure how your international languages are going, but mine are terrible. In classic English-speaking tradition, we can speak nothing but our own language. So anyway, I think we've talked enough shit for now. I think it's time to introduce the guest.
Yeah.
So today we are being joined by the wonderful Faye, who I'm so jealous of this. She lives in Barcelona, which is one of the most beautiful cities.
It must be
Europe.
nice.
I love Barcelona to pieces. So there is a small part of me that hates her for that. But she suffers from a disease called fibromyalgia, which I don't know a great deal about. I don't know if you do. So
no.
We shall cut straight through now and speak to Faye.
All right, let's bring it on.
Brad and Dan talk shite.
Faye, welcome to the show. Actor, director, writer, and all-round theatre creator, living her best life in Barcelona. How the devil is life over there in sunny Spain?
Amazing. It's beautiful weather. We're having a cold snap and we don't have heating indoors, but it is really warm and sunny outside. So
What's your definition of a cold snap comparative to mine?
Well, actually, it has been pretty cold. It's been like 3 degrees when I've been heading out for work. So that's really cold here.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's cold for here as well, to be fair. Brad's just going to shame us all and say he lives at like minus 516 degrees all year round.
I'm not in that part of Canada, but we definitely got our own cold snap back, and it's about -5 today. So
Wowzers.
-5. Nice.
brisk.
So, yeah, brisk is the word. So, Faye, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about why we are so interested in talking to you today?
Sure. Yeah. So, just about me, I think you've kind of covered that in the intro. That I'm a theatre maker, originally from the UK, living in Barcelona, and you guys reached out to me because I'm a sufferer of fibromyalgia, which is, of course, one of many invisible illnesses and chronic illnesses that currently has no cure and that we have to live with. And I guess we just wanted to have a little chat about what it is and learn how to say it.
We went through that in the pre-roll.
Yeah. That's the trouble with a lot of illnesses. There's far too much Latin involved. So, okay, I'll lead on this. So fibromyalgia is literally the Latin for painful fibers and muscles. So that kind of gives us a definition of what you have to deal with on a daily basis. Obviously, that's a very small, condensed version of what you have to deal with. So one of the things I was keen to talk to you first of all about is how does fibromyalgia affect your daily life? Now, I'm assuming it's like any chronic illness. There's good days, there's bad days, there's horrendous days, and there's days where it doesn't bother you in the slightest. So I think I'm going to steal one of Brad's questions here a little bit. So tell us what a good day is like and what a bad day is like.
Good question. So yeah, it does affect every day of my life. And for me, the overriding kind of experience that I have is pain. I'm in pain all of the time. There is never a day that goes by that I'm not experiencing pain somewhere in my body. And with fibro, it does flare up, and you can also go into periods of kind of, I almost said recession, but I guess
Remission.
Yeah.
Thank you. There we are. We're all
living in the UK. We're in a constant state of recession at the moment. That's an entirely different podcast.
Yeah, different point. Remission. But however, I think even a period of remission, which I think I might have been in the past year or so, I'm still in some level of pain.
Right.
So I guess a good day for me would be usually I almost always have pain in my back and legs, but ignorable, not dealing with any fatigue. Maybe I've slept quite well. Maybe don't take painkillers, which is rare. I normally take painkillers every day.
Okay.
And a bad day is being unable to walk. Like my body goes into complete stiffness and I'm not able to, when I stand up, to unfurl my body is so stiff and so painful that it's just not even worth it. Yeah, I just end up as a little curled over woman.
Your back and legs, is that your primary pain points when you're going through it?
For me, it tends to be, just because I think I use it. My job's super physical, so I'm on my feet a lot, and I do a lot of lifting. I work in theatre, touring theatre. But it's different for different people. Like I get a load of pain in my hands, lots and lots, which is a really common one. And the pain moves, and the pain can be widespread. So on a bad day, I feel like everything upon me is in pain.
Right. Sorry, Dan.
Sorry, Brad. I was just going to ask, so on the remission theme, I think this again is quite common within chronic illness. How, I mean, we can get into how the pain and the illness itself affects mental health further down the line, but I just think the remission thing, what struck me straight away, if I was used to being in that much pain, and this might just speak volumes about my untrusting nature, but if I was in remission, I would just be spending the whole time thinking, when's it coming? You know, is that a thing, or is this just, are you so used to how your body behaves now that you just take the good days and as good days? And
well, sometimes I feel if it's like in a period of remission, because I still have some pain, like I said, I feel that I'm always still living with it. But then I sometimes get this massive imposter syndrome because it's less painful and I don't feel worthy of giving myself the title of
Yes.
a fibro person, that I'm like, have I even got this illness? And I have to look it up and go, yes, I have. Like, what are you talking about?
Good.
You've had it years. And I've come across that actually on some fibro forums, where people have said, well, you exercise 5 times a week, because that's one of the things that helps me the most is
Mhm.
exercise. You can't possibly have fibro, or you're not as bad as me. And it, so I
So
guess
it's chronic illness dick swinging is some of the worst
yeah,
things out there.
Yeah, it is a problem, but it's honestly just people get stuck in their own head and what they're dealing with, that sometimes they can't see outside of their own situation. That kind of leads me to one of the things I love to talk about with most chronic illness is the fact that listening to your body is a key thing. Your body's generally going to tell you what's going on. But throughout my reading with fibromyalgia, I did it, haha.
you did it, hurrah.
How I've seen that it's not exactly an easy thing. The whole listening to your body is kind of just it's not easy when you have so many symptoms firing off and you don't know what is attributing to what. Like how do you find listening to your body? Does that work? Is there a way for you to figure out the steps, the symptoms, what's happening?
Well, I think that I'm a bad person, an example of listening to my body for sure, because my job is so physical.
Right.
I often just like force myself through a lot of the pain. But obviously, like you guys will know, with all chronic illnesses, you start to learn what the triggers are for you, and you
Yes.
start to recognize in yourself the language of your own illness,
Mhm.
like physical language of your own illness. So I know, oh, that type of pain, I'm gonna suffer, or this type of pain I can probably work through, or do some restorative yoga or something kind of like that. It's just me, yeah, learning really. The problem is the lack of knowing and being able to predict. So sometimes
Right.
I think all those things, and I've learned so much, and then just a flare up just comes out of nowhere for absolutely no reason, and I'm flawed. And they're the ones that I think I
Yeah.
struggle, not the
You think you've
most.
got it, and then something just comes and smack, and you're like, "What? Where'd that
Yeah,
come
I
from?"
didn't do anything. I laid on the beach all day. Why?
Yeah. You mentioned the yoga. That actually kind of leads to another one of my questions is like, outside of yoga, is there any other activities that help you manage, I'd say control, but as you said, there's only so much control that can happen. What helps you try to alleviate some of your pain and discomfort?
Apparently not lying on the beach.
Well, in that example. So I this is one of the things that I've come across, and got a lot of backlash in with the chronic illness dick swinging. I exercise a lot, and I
Right.
exercise to quite a advanced degree, like intense hit training 5 to 6 times a week if I'm not in flare up, because I found the fitter I am, the stronger I am. The more cardio endurance I've got, the less flare-ups I
Okay.
encounter. And actually I remember when I was first diagnosed, I saw like 7 different general medical practitioners, be it nurses or doctors in GP surgeries,
Right.
and they all said rest. The best thing you can do is rest. And when I finally, like a couple of years later, got through to an actual specialist in a hospital, she said the worst thing you can do for fibromyalgia is stop moving. It's the worst thing you can do. You
Okay.
have to push through the pain, and that takes honestly a couple of years to be
Right.
able to get through, and it's hell. But once you can get through and start moving, and I'm not saying everybody would ever be able to exercise as
Mhm.
much as I can or to the degree that I do, but that is, if I don't exercise for a few weeks, the pain is back
Right.
in droves.
So for those
So
who might not be into it yet, maybe start small, do some core
sure,
exercises, something like that, go from there. That
yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
yeah. And I've recently discovered, and this really is a discovery this month, that yin yoga is really helpful. And
Okay.
I've never discovered this type of yoga before, yin yoga, but it's about kind of restoration in the myofascia and the collagens rather than in the muscles or the joints.
Oh,
And that's where fibro is living, really. It's living in the nerves, but it's not like my muscles are inflamed or my joints are inflamed or anything. And it's a
Right.
type of yoga that you hold poses for a really long time, but really gentle poses. And I think anyone kind of maybe with fibro, even arthritis or anything, might find some relief in
Okay.
yin yoga, YIN. So I could recommend that.
I'll have to look that one up too to let people
Mhm.
know. I've never heard of it.
I literally discovered it 2 weeks ago, I think.
Oh wow. Okay.
Brand new for me.
Just going back a couple of steps, you were talking about when you finally got to see a specialist. Now, I know fibromyalgia for a long time was almost not believed to be a thing by a lot of the medical community. And I think there's a lot of that with a lot of chronic illnesses. But one of the interesting things I saw on my reading, Brad, just to one up on there. So fibromyalgia can't be detected in blood tests. You know, there's some sort of brain scan you can have which can highlight fibromyalgia, but it's a very recent thing. So how did your journey from symptoms to actual diagnosis come about? Because again, something else I read today was that on average it's 5 years from symptoms starting to actually getting diagnosis, and people are often put through an awful lot of unnecessary investigations along the way because it's almost part of the arthritic family. It's also got autoimmune family there. There's a lot of overlapping spheres of medicine, I guess. So
Yeah.
what was your experience going from, so like what were your first symptoms and the progression through to that eureka moment of someone saying, you've got this, and you go,
Yeah.
oh, thank fuck. Someone's actually
I
saying I'm not crazy.
Yeah. So my first symptoms, I can remember really clearly, and honestly, you're right. It was between 4 and 5 years from my first symptoms until I received
Right.
my diagnosis. And my first symptoms were, I remember I was living with my sister at the time, and I was walking from the bedroom to the bathroom, and I just felt like knives were sticking into my feet. And it was in the middle of the night if I got up to go to the loo, and it was just happening every single night. And then the next symptoms were when I was trying to hold my phone, my hands were so heavy with pain just with holding my phone. And that's kind of how it started. And then the pain became over a period of probably, I don't know, a year or two. The pain started becoming more and more. And I remember then the fatigue started getting me.
Right.
And I can always remember it. I mean, I think you would remember it, as any of your listeners and yourselves would know, developing a chronic illness, you're aware of everything anyway.
Yeah.
But one of my best friends was diagnosed with leukemia at about a similar time. And I remember him going through what he was going through, and me just like laying down and being like, I have to figure this out. I don't think for a second I've got leukemia, but I have to figure this out. And us sharing our medical journeys. And I remember getting up I'd moved back to London in that time. I wasn't living with my sister. And I remember trying to go from upstairs bedroom to the downstairs in the house and having to take like 4 or 5 breaks because I was in so much pain. I couldn't do it. And a housemate coming and helping me and putting me on the sofa, and me just having to sit there and just crying. And I don't recommend using Google Doctor, but I'd seen so many people and everybody was like, it's nothing. And here's a blood test for arthritis. Oh, you don't have it. And here's a blood test for this. Oh, you don't have it. And they tested me for diabetes about 20 times because I mentioned that I drink a lot of water. It just doesn't even relate, but never mind. Anyway, I Googled, why do I feel like I've been hit by a truck? That's how I felt. I felt like I had been hit by a truck. I dragged my sorry little body back in the house, and I was laid there hit by a truck. And it just this exact question just came up over and over and over again on fibro forums, over again. And so I looked and I was like, fibromyalgia. Oh, I've never heard of this. What is this? And looked it up on the NHS website in the UK. And I had every single symptom, even the symptoms that are so rare that only a few people have that. And I forgot, I'd been diagnosed with IBS a couple of years previous, which is related to fibro. Yeah. And I printed it out, and I'd seen a few doctors, and I ended up going to a practice nurse. I don't know why. And I took it and printed out, and I put it in front of her, and I said, this is what I've got. I've got this. And she was like, no, you haven't. You're too young, even though that's completely wrong because I was exactly the right age for it to start presenting. And she said, it's not that. And she went, you haven't got this symptom, and read it. And I was like, yes, I have. She went, you don't have the shakes. And I was like, yes, I do. You don't have every single symptom ticked off. And then finally that practice nurse said, oh, yeah, I can't diagnose you, but this is what we're going to start looking for. And that's the point they started looking for it. But even then, they gave me a likely diagnosis. They started testing me for every autoimmune disease under the sun, and only gave me a likely diagnosis, which then, as it was at the time in the NHS, would not be confirmed for 2 years because they wanted to allow it to develop into lupus or into MS or into a multitude of other things that I had to diagnose.
Right.
So I had to wait 2 years. And one locum doctor said, oh, yeah, I think you've got MS, and just came out and said that. And I was like, oh, that thing that you can die from. Like,
Oh, no.
I'd rather have the other one, please.
Yeah.
Like, why? You can't just say that in this way. And she was like, no, I think you've got MS. That's that. Oh,
man.
Yeah, it was not the greatest day.
You mentioned in our pre-chat, we're talking about it, and one of the key points that you mentioned that I didn't see too much is that it's actually not in the autoimmune family. It's more neurological, and you were talking about the point in your brain where they're starting to see where it could be displaying itself. Have you had any neurological scans yet, or is that almost like a future hope, like that you can be scanned and more identified through that, rather than just lining up the symptoms and saying, yeah, this is this?
I actually had not heard about the scanning, Dan, until you mentioned it at the beginning.
Okay.
Just earlier on this recording.
It's literally within the last year or so that this research has come out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably not nailed on. So anyone listening, don't go to your GP or your doctor and say.
I had this, as we were talking about in the preamble, Brad, that I had also read, and I said the same thing, like I've only read this, that they've discovered where it lives in the brain. But the thing that I'd read, which is maybe a little bit older than maybe what you've read, was that the way that they could see that it existed there in the brain is to do a brain biopsy, which obviously, is not something that can happen. But that is a while ago.
Okay.
The scanning's the new thing that I'm learning about in this moment. So.
A little less invasive.
Yeah. I'm all right with not having the brain biopsy.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
I wouldn't put it on your bucket list.
No.
So one of the questions I'm interested in, and this is a much broader issue to do with women's health in the medical world. So we know that for every 9 women with fibromyalgia, there is 1 man. And I wonder if you feel that there has been well, in fact, lay my cards on the table. I think there clearly has been a certain level of misogyny within the medical field for years and years and years. And I think it's getting better now. I just wonder if you, in your experience over the last few years, have felt that a certain level of misogyny or distrust of fibromyalgia as being an actual quantifiable thing has impacted your treatment, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I don't know if maybe I've just been lucky, but although my specialist was female, but obviously she's a specialist, so she was a rheumatoid specialist, but covers fibro. I personally haven't come across what I could term in my experience a kind of misogyny. I have had one male doctor recently who was brilliant. I have had from multigenders where you feel that people don't necessarily believe in it. Right, and I think Lady Gaga be getting it across both the wider population and maybe less of the medical population, but while we're talking about it, has brought a lot of awareness and people are starting to believe in it more. But I have certainly felt like I had to fight a lot because of this mystery pain that I was feeling, and that it wasn't like nothing was inflamed, and because it is living in the nerves at the beginning. But I think once I got my diagnosis, and maybe I'm an isolated case, I don't know. Once I got my diagnosis, I didn't feel I was disbelieved in the medical community. I think I banged on a load of medication. That was for sure. But
maybe this is my purely based on what I heard people saying like 20 years ago. You know, in the last 10 years, I'm sure things have become much more. Well, it has been proven now, with these brain biopsies and CT scans of the brain, I guess. I just, this isn't a question, this is just a point. I think that women have suffered massively over the years through a lack of research in illnesses that affect women more than men. We know that there's like fibromyalgia, we still don't know proper causes of menopause and stuff like that. So it's a real crying shame that we're at that point. I think things are turning, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
But anyway, on that note, let's get to something slightly more light-hearted. Go on, Brad, lift the mood.
Lift the mood.
Well, pardon me, I don't know if it's lighthearted. So within a lot of the chronic illness communities, we often have different analogies that we like to use that represent like how much energy or such we have for a given day. A long time ago, for the last like decade or so, there's been the spoon method or analogy. In my research, I also noticed that the fibro community also not only talks about the spoon method, but then also has what's called the battery method, referring to energy levels as like a phone battery. Do you attribute to any of these? Do you talk about like a certain amount of spoons you have per day or such? Like, is this something you relate to?
Yeah, for sure. And when I remember first reading the spoon theory when I was like traveling in the US, maybe I was traveling somewhere, and I read somebody sent me the spoon theory, and I was like, finally I have a way to describe something what this is a way to describe to someone what this is actually really like. I think now I tend to refer to the battery because it's quicker.
It is. It doesn't. The spoon method takes a lot. I had to describe this to two people today. So like
you're gonna have to describe it to me, to be honest. Okay. I've never heard of this before. So let's start with me being the idiot in the room.
For those, and bear with me, I'm going to paraphrase, but generally the spoon method or analogy is every one of us, mostly chronic illness folks, we have so many spoons per day. Each task, each thing we do takes a certain amount of spoons. So say I get up to make breakfast. That takes me a spoon. I've got, let's say 5 spoons in the day. That means I have 4 spoons left to get through the day and all of my tasks. And each task takes a certain amount. That's a little harder to describe than now what's coming about. What we talked about is the battery method. People understand a battery level, right? So it's a similar thing, just more referring to like 20%, 40%.
So when I saw in your episode notes something about the spoons theory, I was thinking of a chain of pubs in the UK, but that's probably says more about my habits than anything else.
You can use that to solve fatigue too.
Yeah. You got that right. But yeah, so how did you interact with, as you said, you learned the spoon method. Like, how did you go about with this?
So first, I think I use it to help my family more quickly understand what that meant, because I think that my family, my mum and sister particularly, who I'm closest to, are incredible. And when I was first diagnosed, went about trying to do everything they could to understand my illness. And yeah, like we did, my sister has endometriosis, and like we did with her. And but there was some things that I just couldn't describe. And like, you can't describe what actual chronic fatigue feels like without having felt it. It's not just been tired. It's not just been jet lagged. It's not just in those moments when we're all severely exhausted. It's something beyond that.
Yeah.
And the spoons method enabled me to describe it better to them by us assessing together, how many spoons do we all have today? Like, and then after a night out when we're hungover, how many spoons do we start off with? And then after that, well, when I've got chronic fatigue, I've probably got 2 spoons, and I have to eat and probably won't shower.
Yeah.
But I have to maybe I have to get the washing out. It's not going to happen. Do you know what I mean? I'm just going to run out of spoons through eating alone. And that's not going to be cooking. I'm probably going to have to order something, and then to get to the door is a nightmare. So I guess it just really helped me with those people that I was closest to understand a little more of kind of the gravity of what some of it was, because that's hard to get across, I think, without an analogy.
No, I think you're right. You definitely hit it on the point. It helps those not going through these things get a better understanding of what our everyday life is without like going through like the depths of what we're going through. It's a quick, easy explanation.
It's very hard to quantify what you're going through, like you say, though. So to have something like that out there is really, really useful. Thanks for telling me that, Brad, 6 months ago. Really touched by that.
It's something that I haven't, like, I've always been aware of, but I, for whatever reason, I've never actually used it myself. But a lot of the people in the IBD community and folks I deal with have used it. So I figured it was a good thing to bring up, considering how difficult it can be to get through a day.
Yeah, for sure.
So when you are in those worst moments of chronic fatigue and stuff, is there anything you do to try and keep a positive mentality?
I used to be really bad at putting it out there. I used to like really go into myself, and I remember, I don't know if you guys experienced the same, but the first few years after diagnosis, maybe 2 years, I never wanted to talk about it. I never wanted anyone to put it on social media that I had a chronic
we just made a
disease or
podcast
illness.
about it.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
well done.
We're on the opposite ends. He's new. I'm 20 years.
That end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But now I find and it's not, what I struggled with is if I put it out there that this is how hard my day is today, people are going to think, oh, she just wants attention. Look at her. That's what I was struggling with. And actually now I've learned that if I'm having a really, can I say shit on this podcast? I mean, it's called shit.
It's called
Is that all right?
So,
If I'm having a really, really shit day, the best thing I can do is reach out and know people are with me. And, you know, I'll just say, give me a Netflix recommendation. What's a good movie? Like, and honestly, it is. And I've started being better at doing that, I think. And that kind of helps me cope a little bit. And some people come and bring me things, which is really nice, even if it's just paracetamol or ibuprofen or cocodamol, like, or tea, you know, it's really, really, really sweet.
It's
and
the
that,
thought.
Yeah, it's the thought, exactly. And the compassion makes me a bit happier.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah, a support network of any sort is really important when times are tough, and that you know, that's everyday life as well. It's not just people living with chronic illness who need that level of support, and this is why it's so important to talk to people. For everyone to talk. If you're having a bad time, just reach out to someone and say, I'm struggling, and then if you're male, they'll generally turn around and tell you to fuck off. But you know, there are certain people out there who will actually take the time to actually give you some much needed love and attention.
And on that note, as I think I found that one of the things that has helped me most living, and I mean, I've come to terms with it a long, long time ago now because I've been diagnosed for over a decade, but I get a lot of people now, friends of friends reaching out, or a friend's mum, for example, friends reach out to me and say, this person's just been diagnosed with fibro. Can they reach out to you? And I always say yes, because I remember in them early days of not knowing, and why it's amazing that you guys are doing this podcast, like in those early days of not having anyone who I could chat to, and going on these forums that, like I said, I wasn't doing it right, or people were really miserable and decided there was no more joy in life, or you know, there were things on them that could be quite unhelpful. I feel now quite honored that I'm able to chat to people, even if it's just to be like, I'll send you a funny joke, or if you don't understand why you feel like your skin's on fire, I can say, oh yeah, that's normal, that's us, you know. So.
That is one of the blessings of the internet, to be fair, because if you don't know anyone in your locality, in your local area who's suffering from this, then you will find people online. And I know you said like the looking at Dr. Google is the worst thing in the world, which it can be, absolutely. You know, I was a nurse for 10 years. I met many people who diagnosed themselves with heart attacks when they just coughed. But you also said about like the community, the dick swinging thing. I've got it worse than you. You don't know how bad it is. But there are so many utterly fabulous people out there who, at your worst, will reach out and offer you a helping hand and let you know that life isn't as terrible as it seems in your bleakest moments. I mean, I say it's one of the wonders of the web. It's one of the wonders of humanity as well, to be fair. Our ability for empathy and sympathy is fantastic, and we need to take advantage of it. It's just, I suppose, the web's made us closer.
Yeah, sure.
It's, you know, it's also given us access to pornography, but that's a different story.
And that also helps with fatigue.
There you go.
or causes fatigue, depending on your
Or
usage.
whichever way.
Okay, so we talked about you're an actor, a director in the theater life.
Yeah.
How I think we briefly talked about this, but how does your fibro interact with your daily work life? Are there times when you're at work and you just have to take a moment and stop, recollect yourself, try to like get a hold of what's going on? And then I guess part of that is, how are your coworkers along? Like, do they understand? Are they good with you and what's going on?
Yeah. So I think for me, one of the things, if I'm on a really bad day, I can't go to my work and
Mhm.
do my job. Like luckily, since I've been in Spain, I work for a theatre company out here. I only had to have 1 day off last year, maybe 2, where I
Okay.
couldn't actually physically move. The rest of the time, I honestly, to be truly honest with you, I pop pain pills and
Mhm.
drink coffee to just try and get through it, because the show must go on. Like I
Like the
chose
The
rest of
this
show
us.
must
job.
go on.
The show must go on, and I love my job. And we call it Doctor Theatre because the adrenaline and the chemicals that are going to run around my body do have a
Yeah.
kind of pain relieving effect
Okay.
to a point.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was going to ask about that. So does the stage fright / adrenaline have a positive effect on your illness?
In the moment, I would say absolutely, and it's very rare. I would be able to get through a show no matter what. Like
Mhm.
if I can't, then I'm not going to go to work.
Yeah.
But then it's after the show that the body, like now, I'm in quite a lot of pain, and my body kind of just starts tensing and going physical when the adrenaline leaves my body.
So you've got quite a severe come down from the adrenaline.
Yeah, and the
Right.
body
I mean-
tends to kind of, it feels, it's not spasming. That's not what it's doing, but it just feels
Mhm.
like everything's just squeezing,
Constricting a little.
constricting. Yeah. But my coworkers are as good as I allow them to be, because it depends how much I let them know, and I'm really bad at that. And I found it easier in the UK because there's this huge movement in the UK about being, in the UK, it's argued whether fibromyalgia is a disability or not, but in the world of theatre, it's an accepted disability.
Okay.
And I've just found everybody was brilliant, and it's not that they're not brilliant here in Spain. It's just things are seen differently. And all my boss is amazing, my co-workers are brilliant when I tell them.
Right.
But I'm a bit useless at being like, God, guys, I've got loads of pain today. Can I lift less? Like, can I do less of the setting? I admit that I need to be better at that. And when I do tell them, they're absolutely fantastic.
That's good. That's really good.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, having an understanding employer is just the best thing ever.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you say about the adrenaline come down. So the worst hangover I've ever had is when I had an anaphylaxis, because I've got a nut allergy. So I had a full-blown anaphylaxis. Luckily, I was at work, so I was working in a hospital, and an anaesthetist was pretty much stood next to me as I started to, as my head started to swell. But obviously, the treatment for that is pump you full of adrenaline.
Right.
So I had about 12 hours being pumped full of adrenaline. The next day, Jesus Christ, it was the worst hangover in the world. I was sat on the sofa and I literally couldn't find the energy to lift the remote to change the channel. I ended up having to watch a full hour of Loose Women. It was the worst day of my life.
Oh no, that's so much worse than I ever imagined.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still scarred to this day.
And
But
here goes Brad looking this up.
I was going to say, Brad, have you
so-
never even heard of Loose Women?
So
Goodness.
Loose Women, well, we should say this for any international listeners. Essentially, Loose Women is a panel show on a lunchtime weekday
Every
where
weekday.
4 or 5 middle-aged women basically cackle and belittle each other for an hour.
So is it the
I
British
gossip.
The View? Like
Yeah,
Oh,
in
okay.
fact, yeah, that's precisely what it is.
Okay.
And if you like that sort of thing, that's fine. But for me personally, you may as well just shoot a nail gun in my eyes. That's how much I want to watch it. So yeah, anyway, the adrenaline hangovers are horrendous. So if that's the kind of vibe you have to go through after a show, you are quite simply one of the strongest women alive. So
I will take that and wear it with pride.
So we're running out of time here. We got a few minutes left, so I think if Dan doesn't mind, I want to end this with a positive question, but also like a retrospective question. If you were able to go back and have a conversation with your younger self, what is something you would tell yourself subsequently? What would you like people to know who are starting their battle journey with fibromyalgia?
I'd want them to know. I'll tell myself, younger self, move. Don't sit around. Start moving. That's, I think, I spent 3 to 4 years in hell, putting on weight, depressed and anxious because I
Hmm.
didn't start moving, in pain, fatigued, and life still exists. The
Yeah.
quicker you accept it and look at ACT therapy, the quicker you accept it, the quicker you find that there's so much joy out there, and you are amazing and you are strong and you will find a way. And then when you're coping with it, you will start being able to say, I'm incredible, and you won't be apologetic about it.
I love that. That's a good
Yep.
message.
Well, Faye, you certainly are incredible. Thank you very,
Thank you
very
so
much
much.
for taking the time to join us. The time difference has made it quite a late one for you, so we apologise for that.
Not a problem.
You know, it's been great to chat to you. Take it easy. Take care of yourself.
Thank you so much.
Much love. See you later.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Brad and Dan talk shite.
Well, heartfelt thanks to Faye for joining us this evening. What an absolute treat that was.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest, Brad. I didn't know jack shit about fibromyalgia
I knew nothing.
before this. I knew that people kind of didn't believe in it for a long time. It was one of those, you know, same as like mono.
Oh, yeah,
I think
yeah.
a few people didn't really dig that for a while. But when looking into it, wow, I mean, these people who suffer with it, that's fucking horrendous
They're almost
burden to live with.
Yeah, like they're almost basically trailblazers in a way, because they're the ones who are helping. They're on the front lines making sure that this is being seen by a greater public, by the doctors, by people, by family.
Absolutely. But doing that while feeling like you've been stabbed 1,000 times.
I've got like gut pain is insane, but going through the
Just
whole
everywhere.
body.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we could have talked to Faye for another hour, and
Yeah.
we may get her back on another day to discuss other things. But again, and this blows my mind with seemingly everyone we talk to, the positive mental attitude.
Yes.
And it's like, I think it was when she said, I'm in constant pain. But,
Right now.
you know, the
She
show
even said
goes
right
on.
now.
Just like, yeah. It's like, how? What?
Yeah.
No.
It's the courage and dedication someone takes to just stamp it down and be like, no, I'm getting on with my day. Like,
it's almost a belligerent attitude to the illness.
yes.
It's like a fuck you.
Pretty much.
I'm living my life. You're not getting me down.
You ain't controlling me.
Yeah. You can't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And slamming the door as she storms out. I mean, yeah, that's fantastic.
No, I'm really happy that we can spread awareness for this.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully, you know, people will hear Faye's story, and maybe some people will actually go and seek the correct help. Because I think I read somewhere that there's 2% of the population have this disease in it was North America, and you just wonder, given that there is an issue with diagnosing this disease, if that is a true 2%, or if there are a lot of people out there who are suffering with less extreme versions of it. And you know, now it's been taken more seriously. There can maybe treatments, or as Faye was talking about, different coping mechanisms, about like how she went from everyone saying, do not fucking move, stay still, wrap yourself in cotton wool, and just live out your days suckling on the teat of society. And she was like, no, I can't do that. And then there was one doctor who said, no, that's the worst thing to do. Get up, go out, live your life. And it's those kind of misconceptions that can be really damaging. So hopefully, with it become better known and more people becoming diagnosed, and treatments can become
100%.
more useful. So Yeah, mind blown by that interview, to be honest.
Yeah, same here.
And just like I say, just not knowing anything about it before we started doing a little. I mean, let's be honest, it was basic background reading we did. We've not written a thesis on the disease or anything. But all you have to do is a couple of Google searches to find out how hard it is for people, and then to speak to Faye, they absolutely blew my mind.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was an honor to talk to her and learn about fibromyalgia. I had a little lesson with her when in our preamble. I was like, okay, how do I say this?
Yeah, in your preamble, which was forced upon you by my being late to the record.
Oh,
so
does my
apologies for that.
anxiety not like that? I was just like, I am alone. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I've got the dog pawing at the door desperately to get my attention. She'll have to wait.
Dang dog.
Pesky dog. Yeah. She doesn't want to go outside. It's blowing a gale. She would literally blow away. So, yeah, massive thanks to Faye. And we will see you again soon, guys. Thanks
see
for
you
listening.
soon.
Thanks for watching. Always a pleasure.
Next time.
There is this guy from Canada called Brad, and a guy from Yorkshire, he's called Dan. They got together when the Bowels tried to kill them, and made this podcast to talk about their illness. Brad and Dan are talking shit. Brad and Dan are talking shit. Yes, Brad and Dan are talking shit to you and you and you.